So, Stephen, what is the one thing that truly maximises the value of someone's home when they go to sell their property?
Skilled negotiator. So if I was a seller, I want that agent to get every last single penny from that buyer. So a lot of the time I hear agents talking about, oh, it's all about a cheap fee. For me, it's never about a cheap fee. It's about how much money can that agent put in that seller's pocket and how good are they at demonstrating their negotiating skills. So I can give you a couple of extremes. So actually, I wish I learned what I'm going to teach you now a lot sooner, but this was 5 years ago. I was very fortunate. I was able to travel to Australia at the Australian Real Estate Conference, and I learned this here. So, John, do you own the property that you live in now?
Not this one I live in now, no, rented.
Okay, so last property, I remember because your story was fantastic, what you shared. So, but your last property that you bought, I don't know if you can remember that far back.
Yep,
Okay, did you buy it through an estate agent?
yep,
Good. Would you have paid any more money for that property?
yep.
How much more?
Probably another 7 to 10 grand, I would say.
Okay. So would you have paid 11,000 for it?
At a push.
12?
If I had competition,
13?
you're talking me up.
Okay. Look, where are we going to stop? Genuinely, where
Yeah.
would we stop?
Uh, Probably 13, I'd say.
Okay. Okay. So let me ask you a question, John. Which estate agent would you prefer to sell with? Me, who's demonstrated in 30 seconds, I would have got your seller an extra £13,000, or the agent that cost your seller £13,000?
You, absolutely.
The investment in my services is 2% plus that, and I'm still the cheapest agent. So, so for me, that's an easy way. If there are any agents watching this, that's a really easy way of demonstrating how you're a skilled negotiator. Now, I do this when I'm trying to, I'm a trainer, I consult, I work with a lot of estate agents. So recently, I had a really lovely introduction by another supplier in the industry to an estate agent. Now, exactly the same conversation, he would have paid an extra £75,000 more on the property that he bought. The next one is an extreme. So I interviewed an incredible lady called Lara Morgan, who started a business and she sold it for about £20 million. I heard her speak at the Belvoir conference, and went up to her after, and I asked her whether I could shadow her. And she said I couldn't shadow her, but she'd give me a call. Long and short of it, she came on my podcast, was exceptional. Now she would have paid an extra £435,000 on the mansion house that she bought. Now, that's
Wow.
a hell of a lot of money. And that agent, who is a well-known national brand, didn't get every last single penny. So a lot of agents, and I know you've got people, and you do an incredible job, John. And I know we've known each other for a long time. And there's one story I'm going to share today when we get to it, because I share it in every one of my training sessions, and it's about you and something you we discussed years and years ago. So for me, it's about that agent. What can they do to negotiate every last single penny for that seller? Because whether it's £10, whether it's £1,000, whether it's £435,000, that could make a massive difference to that seller's journey onto their next chapter of their life. But
Hmm.
so many agents just get, oh, right, do you know what? I know that seller's going to accept 200,000. I'll get 200,000. Yes, I've done a deal. How fantastic. Well, hold on a second. You know, why are you accepting that first offer? The first offer, by the way, may be the best offer.
Mm.
May well be the best offer. But what are we doing to push to make sure? Are we at least asking that question? They come back and say no, they come back and say no. But why do many agents accept the first offer? And then this is what I want sellers to understand. It's not all about the cheapest fee. It really isn't about the cheapest fee. You pay for what you get sometimes,
Mm.
and it's really interesting. I this week actually, my girlfriend decided is considering selling, so she got three estate agents around, um, and I'm not going to name the estate agents because it's not fair to them. And in fact, they didn't know what I did, and until the end. And the first agent came and we were talking. So, can I ask you how much do you charge? So he said, I charge 1.25%, but I really want this house, so I charge 1%. So I said, that's fantastic. I said, that's great. So I said, you've already negotiated 25% or whatever it is as a percentage of your fee. What does that mean to me when you're selling my girlfriend's property? You're going to negotiate 25% of her house. Anyway, and so in fairness to him, he had an answer, but I don't want to hear that. And again, I'm working with a 12 a group of 12 estate agents, and I'm mystery shopping all of them. It's a simple call, I'm thinking of selling my property, and I've done this loads and loads of times. Can you give me an idea of how much you charge? I've done my work, so I know where my property is in their particular area. Well, we won't be beaten on fees. We tailor our fees. I actually don't know. Can I go and ask somebody in my office and let them know? Our fees could be anything between 1% and 2%. But here's the interesting thing. Not one of them take my name and number.
Really?
So they're missing an opportunity.
Yeah.
Yes, and didn't even ask, they one asked where the property was, which well, at least that was half decent, but they asked the property, but no one else did. So actually, it's scary. Yeah. Coming
Yeah.
back to your original question, I want a skilled negotiator. So one on the office, but also if the agent's already negotiating before just because they want my property. And here was the other thing is the agents. I said, can you tell me how long your agency period is? 12 weeks, 16 weeks. Or can I ask you, why won't you just do it for 2 weeks' notice? Do you not have that belief that you can sell it? So you've heard of Rightmove, you've heard of Rich, and Rightmove and Which both say a property should sell in the first 30 days. And granted, I understand the market is not how it was. So
Mm.
maybe, that could be 6 weeks. But you tell me, why does an estate agent need 12 weeks, 16 weeks? And in fact, my mum asked me to help a 94-year-old friend of hers, and she was tied in for 26 weeks. 26 weeks, 94. And the property was overpriced. And I said to her, when I phoned them up, she gave me permission to speak straight away. We do it to a month. Why is it 26 weeks in the first place? Why?
Yep.
So I was an agent for 20 years myself. I've been a consultant for the last 11 years. I get to see the good, the bad, incredibly ugly out there, and it's very, very scary.
Yeah.
But there are some phenomenal estate agents out there. There are really some brilliant estate agents, not only helping the sellers maximize achieving a premium price, maximizing their investment, but doing so much incredible community work. It's brilliant. And
Mm.
you don't see that. You only hear about the Cowboys. And
Yeah.
here's what makes I still honestly I can't get my head around this, John. What do most people, sellers, just the general public think about estate agents?
Not liked. Distrusted.
That's the word. Okay. Yet, what do most consumers, when they instruct an estate agent, do? Estate agents should be their trusted advisors,
Yeah.
just like a doctor's a trusted advisor.
Mm.
You go to a doctor, they diagnose, and they come up with something that's going to make you better. As estate agents, we should be helping them.
Yeah.
And again, I remember going in, back years ago when I was an agent, and sitting down with the sellers and saying, "Have you thought about actually keeping the property and renting it out?" if you can afford it, have you spoken to anyone? And then, waiting. And they said, no, you're the only agent that's offered that. Okay. 4 years later, I was in a different office. I got a call from a manager of another office to say, Stephen, this particular, I've been back to this lady and she asked whether you were there. And he said, thank you. She said, you go for best advice. And this is the thing, most estate agents see it as a one-off transaction.
Hmm.
For me, it's about every single person should be a client for life. So if you give an exceptional customer experience, full
Yeah.
stop, then that seller should be recommended you to friends, family, colleagues, and neighbours. And that's what it's about. It is a stressful process. It takes far too long. Sadly, it hasn't changed the legalities since I've been doing it, which is crazy considering all the digital technology out there, which is absolutely crazy. We are trusted advisors. Well,
Mm.
let's show them we're trusted advisors.
Yeah.
What we need to do that. So that's what
Do
it's
you
about
do
to
you
me.
think that an agent may have, he or she have a heart, knows what's right, but maybe not suggesting the right thing? So, for example, the 94-year-old lady really shouldn't be signing a 26-week contract, for example, really should be having a handheld. This is how we're going to maximize the money. And by the way, these are the milestones that we're going to meet, and just really treat that person like a human being. Although they could even be equally be like a 27-year-old looking to sell their place, they still need potentially to be handheld too. But do you think it's because the owner of a business or the attitude around that business is set up purely, I don't care whether you like the seller or not, just get the instruction? Do you think it's like that? And then they may be too scared, maybe thinking, well, I need a
But that's
salary,
how
I've got to pay my rent.
that's how people get paid. That's not the right way. It's not the right way. But I held my hands up. The agency that I work with, everybody's on targets.
Yeah.
A lot of people are on targets. You've got to meet your targets. If you don't meet your targets, so will some agents take on overpriced properties for the sake of it? Yeah, of course they will. But they're
Mm.
not giving that seller the right advice.
Yeah.
And again, I remember this going back. Again, I won't mention the agent because it's not fair. But I came along and I thought the marketing price should be 500,000. I had all my recent sales evidence to substantiate that. The other agent said 750. Okay. So if you were that seller, what would you do?
750.
250. Okay. So then 12 weeks agreement every week, 725, 700, 675 to eventually after 11 weeks, it was down at 550. Obviously I kept in constant contact with the seller and then I get a phone call, say, Stephen, can you help me? Of course I will. Stephen, what price can you put it on at? What I said, £500,000. Guess what happened? It was sold 2 weeks after because it was on at the right price. Now that seller's time, how much time was wasted?
Yeah. Like
How
months.
could she have moved? How could she have moved to a next chapter? You
Couldn't.
know, it's not right. It's
Yeah.
not. It's not right.
Um,
And the
um,
other thing that I really liked, actually, just coming back to you because I like this story on Wednesday. So I have three different agents, but the second one, the house has got potential to maybe extend. And here's what I liked about this agent. He said, I would like to bring an architect back to the property to see what could be done. So whether you use us or not, you can then know what can actually be done to your house. Now, to
value.
me, and that's the word, what are agents doing to add value to that seller's journey, to that buyer's journey all the time? And this is where it comes to the story. This is where you added value years and years ago when you were out viewing. And you had a lady in your car, you took her to three properties, and you realised that none of those three were right. And you realised that the property she was going to buy was with one of your competitors. And you actually took her to your competitors and you said, right, in that window is this property. Go and ask them to see it today. You're going to buy it. And I think this lady from memory said, are you mad? Why would you take me to see one of your competitors? She ended up buying it. um, I remember the amount of recommendations and referrals you got as a result of it. And when she came to sell, I wonder which agent she used, John.
I
She
sold it.
used you.
Yeah.
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 That's my
Exactly.
story. I was given training. because you're an exceptional agent.
No, I don't. Obviously, it's a very simple process that can be very complicated. That level of simplicity of being a human being talking to other human beings and trying to discover what they're trying to achieve, what they need to happen in their life, what their perspective is, what their perception is. It's all about them, never about me. I'm just trying to extract that information. Can I help? Can't I help? If I can't help, I'm still going to treat them like a human being. I'm not going to throw my toys out the pram because I can't help them. It's just that I'm not built for maybe what they want. But equally, I know that as an agent, I'm not going to have every single property. But it's never. It took balls of steel, by the way, when you're working for other people to have an attitude like I had, or have, which is very much like, yeah, the bosses may say something, and I know this is bad, but sometimes I'll just go and do something completely different because what I was doing was right in that moment. Taking a buyer to another agency, yeah, an owner would go, why would you do that? That's ridiculous. You're just basically putting money in the hands of, no, I'm not. No, I'm not at all. I'm not putting the money in the hands of another agent. I've just given them a lead that I know is going to buy that flat, that I'm future proofing myself, because when the market gets tough and that buyer needs some assistance, who are they calling? They're calling me. And they want me to come out. And so agents that are like that, I would say, it's interesting, Stephen, because that represents elite level agency, an elite level agent prepared to do something like that. Obviously, there's loads of mechanics behind that. But in reality, that's not actually that elite. That's just doing what's right.
Yeah, and 95% of agents have no stay in touch policy whatsoever. When they, that's why I talk about this client for life. Really, really important. Proper having a stay in touch policy. So for me, an agent should be calling, you moved into your rental property. I'd most probably call you after 3 days just to see how you settled in.
Yeah.
21 days I'll be calling your landlord to see if you and your family are paying him a backside, John, to see if I can get it fully managed.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
be calling the landlord just to make sure that you're paying your first month's rent and it's in on time.
Yeah.
But agents don't keep in contact. Again, if you buy a property, I should be offering you an annual health check. But
Mm-hmm.
actually, this is your biggest asset. Just to give you some ideas as to what you can do to improve your asset. Now,
Yeah.
it may be a little paint, it may be doing something to your garden, to do that. But I want to come, just like financial advisors speak to their clients every year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is a massive asset. This is a seller's biggest asset. Agents should be doing exactly the same thing. They're always chasing the next property, the next property, the next property. Or actually, the next property may be on their customer base.
Yeah.
So let's keep in contact with our sellers. Let's help them. And if we do give that good, exceptional customer experience, they're going to come back to you. They're going to recommend their friends, their families, their colleagues, and their neighbours. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what's really, really important.
So there was another story back to your point about fee. Myself and my colleague David turned up to this flat. It was a probate sale. Probate had been granted, and this fella called John opened up the door, and he's first thing he said was, "If you're not going to be a 1% agent, then you may as well walk off now." And I looked at this fella and I smiled and I went, my fees are minimum 1.5%, but would you mind if I come in and tell you why? Now, I thought, I'm not having that. I am not having that. And the other two agents that he got in, again, big agents, big names, both pulled their pants down, right? They both promised the world. I think it was like something like stupid, like again, close to 700 grand for the actual property. The property was worth 500 grand all day long. They ended up, 550 all day long. They never sold through these agents. I stayed in contact with them. Now, I didn't actually sell this flat, but what I ended up doing, I knew the buyer who was selling a property that I was selling that wanted this flat, and I negotiated absolutely everything and got it through, even though the other agent earned a commission. But why would I do that? Why would I go and earn the other agent a commission? Because guess what? I'm thinking long term. Because when my buyer, who I've just sold for, buys that one, who are they going to be using? And also the seller, because I made it known to the seller and they knew who I was, that I actually negotiated on that. What are they going to do when they're speaking to a friend in the cafe in Goulburn Road? They're going to be speaking and saying, well, listen, it was actually John that sold our flat. It was actually, you know what I mean? It was, he didn't earn a commission for it, but he actually negotiated everything. The agent couldn't do it. And so it ended up selling what I told him it was ended up going to sell for. That was purely, and to your point, when you were talking about that property that was 725, it ended up selling for 500 grand, which you sold. If they'd have given that property to you originally, and then we go back further in the conversation of, would you have paid more for the house that you previously bought? And they say yes, you would have ended up getting more than 500 grand and actually paid for yourself. Do you know what I mean? So you wouldn't have actually cost the seller any money. And that's, I think, is that heart? Is that a desire from the agent to actually find out the $1 million sentences? Is that what you did when you go to a convention in Australia to actually speak to top agents over there to find out what they're doing? You know, Tom Panos, I always use his phrase in evaluation: property's not in isolation, it's in competition. So what are you going to do to bring all the very, or attract all the very best buyers away from what they're currently looking at now to come and see yours instead? You know, and that I think is that hard, or is that actually attitude? Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's coming from you want to help. You know, we're in a job where we should want to help that seller to get the best price. And ultimately, yes, I get our buyers are our future sellers, so we need to treat them exceptionally well as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because hopefully they can come back and they will be that client for life. So we want everybody to recommend us to it. It's understanding it. And so many people are in this business of it's just transactional to them,
Yeah.
and that's it. Let's just take the money and that's it. It's not about that. It's about understanding that everything you do is for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if you look at America, that's it. A seller is a seller, a buyer is a client for life. They don't ever let go. You
Mm.
know, if you speak to most people, you know, it'd be interesting if you do a poll from people that are watching it. Anybody that's owned their home and bought for an estate agent, how many times have they actually heard from that estate agent since they bought it?
Yeah.
And so many people do works to their property and they're curious to know what it's worth,
Yeah.
but the agent doesn't go back to them. And to me, that's scary. You know, just like you go to an optician every year for an eye test, your car gets serviced every year. Hey, you go to the doctor maybe for a medical, you have a financial advice every year. Yeah, people's biggest tax-free assets, they go into witness protection and never get spoken to.
I'm sorry for laughing, but that is so true. That is so true. But are you seeing like, I don't know what your percent or what your thoughts are, but we're now seeing with you know, say Keller Williams, EXP, Remax, Fine and Country, you know, a lot of these hybrid agents where the guys are working within a platform, and then they're really starting to promote themselves through social media um, as superior agents. A lot of them are that I know. But are you seeing a shift in from a corporate and independent across to a self-employed model? Do you think that's how it's going to look in the next 10 years, or do you think it's actually there's a place for corporate independence and self-employed?
I'm sure there's going to be a place for corporate, independent franchises and self-employed. They're making self-employed hybrid and making a lot of noise at the moment. And I think, like in any businesses, there are some exceptional agents,
Mm,
and they're not so exceptional agents. So in the self-employed models, whether it's any of the names you mentioned, they've got some really top agents in there,
mm,
really top agents. But also, I'm sure they'll be the first to admit it's not for everybody. And you know, one of the things here is, you know, how entrepreneurial are people, and in general. And
mm-hmm.
you know, the more entrepreneurial people are, I think they're very well made for being on the self-employed model.
Yeah.
But whatever model you are in, you should want to do what's best for your client, for the customer. Doesn't matter. But I can see more and more people going to it because ultimately it will be, you know, for some it's a lifestyle, and actually they can just sell one or two properties a month, they make some money, and that's
Mm.
it.
So obviously now, so you've been doing estate agency training for the last 11 years, as you mentioned. What are you running any courses right now? Is there any workshops coming up? If so, how many? How often? How's that looking?
So I was actually the last 10 days it's gone absolutely crazy, and I booked in a lot of work, which is fantastic. And most of the work is I'm going to the agents or I'm doing it via Zoom.
Hmm.
And it's either going to be on how do I create more business relationships, how list a masterclass and a negotiator masterclass. So for me, I actually think agency is very simple. And the person that I follow most is John McGrath in Australia. I
Hmm.
think he's absolutely exceptional, and I've been very fortunate to spend half a day with their head of learning and development there, Troy Malcolm. And I brought Troy over here a couple of times, and I've learned a hell of lot from them. And John says agency is very simple. It's about mastering 4 disciplines. So the first discipline is prospecting, and I've actually come away from prospecting. I don't like it because people won't pick up the phone and call. So I now call it creating business relationships. Same thing, but people do it.
Hmm.
Okay. Then it's about listing. So if you don't create those relationships, you've got nothing to list. So it's all about listing. So what can you do to list? And what I find is a lot of people, if you speak to the public, all they think is an estate agent does is put a property on Rightmove, and that's it. Now, for me, there's 54, 55 things an agent does. So I don't know why estate agents charge 0.5% or anything. For me, I believe every estate agent is worth, between 1.5 to 2%. I firmly believe that. And it's
Hmm.
really easy for me. It's really easy for me to say this. And I'll share with you a story about a client of mine very soon. So remind me if I
Hmm.
forget. So then if you can't list, then you've got nothing to sell. If you're no good at selling, you might as well go home and shut up shop. But the fourth thing is you have to be a skilled negotiator. And if you can master those 4 skills, you're going to be ahead of 95% of estate agents in the UK. So let me just share this story.
Hmm.
So one of the guys that, I do a couple of podcasts. I've got my own one, Lunchtime Learnings, and then I have the estate agency podcast as well. And one of my colleagues on there is an agent, very successful agent. And seller said to him, right, can you come round? He went round and what do you charge? He said 2%. He goes, I've had 2 other agents in, the one at 0.5 and one at 1%. Can't justify paying either 1% or 1.5% more. It's just, you wait. I can get why you're 2%. I see why you're 2%. The social media, the stuff you do in the community, the prices that you get, but I can't justify it. So Andy said to him, I tell you what, why don't you get the 3 agents, um, get some properties and go and meet them and see how they would treat you as a buyer. So first agent at 0.5% turned up 15 minutes late, didn't apologise, said, I'm in a rush because I don't want to be late for my next appointment. The second one turned up on time, but wasn't able to answer one question on the property and said, I'll come back to you, and never heard back from him. And he was at 2%, arrived on time, had the answer to every single question there and then, had a proper history sheet, had, right, let's write down every single question that we are likely to be asked ever. And sat down with the seller on the listing and said, right, whether you use me or anybody else, you're going to get asked. We're going to be asked loads and loads of questions. What I love to do with you now is let's sit down and let's go through every single thing you will ever get asked. Now, you can take that and you can give it to whatever agent you decide. Now, to me, how many agents actually would say that anyway?
Hardly
And
any.
then this person came, he said, Andy, you're instructed. I can see the difference. I can see the value. And I know you're going to get me more money if you
Yeah,
care.
absolutely. But that caring is then breeded an attitude or bred an attitude of uh, excellence, understanding, insights, trying to find out that, like say, that $1 million sentence. Right? Who else can help me? Can Stephen Brown help me with something? I've got a blockage trying to get a buyer over a certain thing. What can I say that's really going to help me, that makes sense for everybody? It's not manipulating or, you know, anyone, but it's just, or misleading anybody, but it's like a certain phrase said a certain way, or maybe my questions that I'm asking are off. How do I ask better questions or something like that? And actually being prepared to be to be accountable, but also to be vulnerable, to say, look, I don't know all the answers, but I may know someone who can. Stephen, can you help me with this? And so that guy that you're mentioning, Andy, has probably got to that stage for all the pain associated learning of actually trying to be better every day. So again, fair play to him, and fair play for him to get in the 2%, and fair play to the seller for actually going, yeah, all right, good, okay, I'm on board. That makes complete sense. Because like you said, there's so much more that comes in to play than just sticking a property on Rightmove, which most, as you say, most sellers think that's all they do.
And here's what's interesting. The best agents out there want to outlearn and out-knowledge all their competitors.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with that. Completely agree with that. And that's why, for me, by the way, selfishly, this is why I do this podcast, because I'm getting all the best, very best people within this industry on this podcast to actually speak to me one-on-one. So I'm getting training. And guess what I'm doing? I'm going to be taking the best parts of that and using it as if it was my own, obviously crediting other people. But I just think it's phenomenal. Stephen, you have been absolutely amazing, mate. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast. I massively appreciate your time.
I'm really grateful for you having me on. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you. And, well done for what you're doing. You're doing a fantastic job. I look forward to seeing your successes and your growth, John.